right, and we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Endless Report. My name is Tony, hosting the show again today. This is our 20th episode of the Endless Report, so I've been here 20 episodes now, thinking about all our 2-hour shows. That means there's about at least 24 hours worth of me, a day's worth talking about games now. So quite a milestone there. I wanted to shout that out, 20 episodes, and to thank you all of our guests, especially Ben and Brian, who have been some regular guests who have joined the show in the past. So to start off our 20th episode today, we're, as always, just going to get right into the news. Not a crazy games news week, but definitely a big news week, I'd say, for the media industry in general. We got a lot of news there, if you might have heard, with HBO, with the movie industry, with TV industry as well, streaming, a lot of things shaking up there. Some other stuff in games as well. Definitely nothing left on the table in games. We definitely have some news to cover today. So as always, I'm going to hop right into the docket here. We got a nice story to start off with here. Nothing too crazy again this week. As you might have seen, a few announcements here. So we do have some exciting new announcements that we did not expect. But some other stuff here are some good updates. So we're going to start with one of those updates here and get it going. So I'm going to pull this up on stream. And as you can see here, that's the Steam Deck. So there's been a lot of updates throughout the year here. There's been some production issues. Obviously, because of COVID, because of the supply chain, it's been a bit of a waitlist system for here. We talked about this on the show earlier, how you could sign up for the waitlist for the Switch. And when I signed up personally, I actually signed up myself to get one of these. I want to say back in April or May, so not too long ago. But I was told I was going to have to wait till at least next year, at least somewhere in the first few quarters of 2023. But we actually have some great news this week, and that's that the production of the Steam Decks are kicking up another notch. So again, I think we reported on this a couple of weeks ago where they started ramping up their production, and now they're ramping up production even more. So as I look here, we currently have all these reservation queues being bumped up. So I've actually gone and checked on my own Steam account, and I've been bumped from next year all the way up to this last quarter here, Q4. So somewhere October, December, somewhere in this holiday season, I'm gonna be able to pick up a Steam Deck myself. I'm pretty excited about that. I think everybody's been talking about this machine in the gaming industry for the last year or so now. Pretty much, we've talked about it enough before. I don't really need to reiterate it there. You can play pretty much any PC game, any Steam game on the go that you could really think of. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule there, but more games are being added every day. So some very cool news for the Steam Deck there. Excited to see how that's going to work out. But we do have some other news that's a little similar here. So I do want to move on because we have some more news kind of on the opposite side here in the portable space. So if I pull this up, we actually have another story here from Nintendo. So they had spoken a few weeks back as well about their expectations for the Switch. And now they're speaking again on this a bit more. And they're saying that they're expecting to ship more Switches this fall. So there's been a bit of a shortage for them. And they're saying that's actually been hurting their sales quite a bit because the demand is still there for Switch, as I'm sure a lot of us know. They're still going for full price, really. I believe they've been knocked down to a little under $300. I believe $279.99 is some of the prices for the old Switch, at least for the original. I can't say that about the OLED. I believe that's still at full price. But yeah, these things are selling off the shelves. And I think Nintendo, unfortunately, just can't keep up with the demand here. So they're hoping that by the holiday season, this production ramps up a bit more. We see a little bit of an end to these shortages. And then we're going to get a lot more of Nintendo Switches in hands this holiday season. So a little bit of a 1-2 there from the PC space as well as Nintendo. And we're going to kind of keep going around the docket here on the first few stories, as these are all pretty quick. We have another story here back around from Nintendo and Steam here to PlayStation. So we're kind of hitting all of the major brands here today. So PlayStation also announced something that's not ideal. They're actually canceling one of their features on the PS5. This is something called Accolades. If you're a PS5 player, you may or may not be familiar with this, and that's for an important reason. That's why Sony is actually getting rid of this, is as they've seen that's a very underutilized feature. I personally, I've said on the show before, I do play on PS5, and this is something that you see on your profile page. So if you're aware, when you do sign on your profile page, usually you'll see a few sections, what kind of games you play, or what trophies you have, what achievements, what things you've accomplished, how many hours you played, your friends list, things like that. But now we see that this Accolades feature as well on PS5 was something else to show kind of your sportsmanship in games. So you would get things like, for example, you'd play a round of a certain game online, and one of your teammates could say, he was a good teammate or he was a good player. I'm going to give him the good sport accolade. So someone else would be able to give this to you, and you'd have to be able to present this badge on your platform, on your profile platform, basically saying there, look at me, I was a good sport. I believe the other ones were something along the lines of, great performance, great gameplay, or, it's all pretty much just general nice little badges that a friendly player can give you to say, hey, nice job, during that game. So basically, unfortunately, with this feature, there wasn't many games that actually supported it. This was something that you really needed to have within the PS5 UI kind of integrated. So there were a few games, I believe, especially during the beginning of the PS5 launch. I believe when Rainbow Six Siege got its PS5 port, they utilized this feature by having after every round of the game, you could give an accolade to a teammate right through the in-game UI. So it kind of worked right alongside the PS5 here. So you did see a lot of Rainbow Six Siege players getting their accolades as that community kind of adopted it. But if you weren't active in that game, or it's a few other games that people relatively were able to do this, there's something you had to kind of dig into the PS5 menus, look through your releasing players, and then go out of your way to really give. So not many people were really utilizing this feature. And that being said, a lot of people had profiles that were pretty much empty, and you would have a slot there saying no accolades. And especially when it's something that's not being used and you're having those kind of virtual points there, it's not something you want to see next to all your virtual achievements, is that you have none of these type, and very much may never will, since it's very player dependent. So obviously in this decision here, Sony has decided that they're going to nix this feature, as they say, and take that out. As far as opinions go on this, obviously I don't have many opinions on the first two stories here, which is supply shortages. We're hoping we get those consoles out in hands this holiday. But as for this one's a little disappointing as well, of course. Of course, we'd want to see features that would have players, enjoying the experience together, giving each other a pat on the back and saying great job. But maybe there's another way to do that. I kind of was one for, when I had my PlayStation account, didn't like seeing that no accolades for a year or two there as it happened. But I believe I got one or two just randomly in the game recently. So it's nice to see there when you do have a little virtual badge. But in terms of its actual value, in terms of its actual meaning, I believe Sony maybe could have taken another route here and maybe tried to emphasize the feature more, or maybe promote something similar in a different fashion that would maybe, execute in a more palatable way for the audience here. But maybe that's the plan. Maybe they nix this feature, they come back around a new software update in a year or so and say, here's a new feature that's way more integrated, is a little easier to use. So we got to keep the benefit of that there. Who knows what's in store for that. But that's about it for my thoughts on that story here. Again, we're kind of getting at all the slightly bad news, slightly confusing supply shortages, all that out of the way here first. We can get into the announcements and the like afterwards. So kind of moving on here into that announcement stage of the show, we have some interesting information here from Microsoft now. So we hit Steam, we hit Nintendo, we hit PlayStation. We're going to go back around to Microsoft and Xbox here and kind of hit the big four. So getting into this, we're going to talk about Activision here, of course. So this was the latest acquisition from Microsoft here. I'm going to bump this out so you guys can see this title a little bit better. So Activision has recently said that there's going to be some premium paid content coming to Call of Duty next year. So this is something I've heard about a little bit before. Can't say much on here, but I do know that we have confirmed, this is things we've known before a bit publicly as well, that 2023 is going to be the first year we don't see Call of Duty in a very long time. Probably one of the first times I can remember in my whole lifetime, really. I mean, Call of Duty's been a franchise that's been around for the past 20, 25 years, and this is going to be the first year in a very long time, back to, I think, Call of Duty 3, 2, those days, even those days, they were going out pretty rapidly, where we're not going to have an annual large giant release here. So this comes straight from Activision this time. This is no longer a rumor. Modern Warfare, that is coming out later this year, is going to be keeping its support here into 2023. So we do know, obviously, the very popular Warzone mode that's been very prominent these past few years with Call of Duty. Obviously, the Battle Royale genre there, if you're aware of Warzone, is so monumental here, and it's been a big moneymaker here for Activision, of course, with the way they've been handling the seasons, additional content, these media shakeups where you have things like Godzilla or Rambo or Die Hard, these very famous franchises and movies, pop culture, what have you, jumping into the game. So obviously Warzone has been a large vehicle for the franchise here. We're expecting to see that Warzone edition somewhere in early 2023. That's the rumor here. So similar to back in 2019 when we saw the original Modern Warfare, I shouldn't say original, Modern Warfare remake, if you will there. That game launched fall of 2019. We then saw the launch of Warzone early 2020 later in that cycle there, so a few months later. So it seems to be a similar cycle here. And as to what that 2023 content may be, I do have some thoughts here. I have some insights. I have some ideas. I'm not sure. I think we're going to be getting something else in the Modern Warfare universe. I think Modern Warfare is very a prominent part of this franchise. I think it arguably the most prominent part of this franchise. Obviously, Black Ops, the World of War, the Treyarch games are very prominent as well. But I think coming back to Modern Warfare 2 here, again, Modern Warfare 2, again, kind of funny here. It's the remake, sequel to the remake, Modern Warfare 2019. But Modern Warfare 2 was a game that came out 10 years ago on the Xbox 360 and on the PS3 generation there. So to see that kind of nostalgia game that we're playing here with the marketing, which makes total sense, bringing back that same art style, that same feel there. It's bringing me back to when I was younger and everyone at school was playing Modern Warfare 2. Now here I am as an adult seeing this game launch again. I think a lot of people my age and older, younger, everyone who's played Call of Duty, it's been pretty like I said, just prominent throughout these last few decades here. I think are excited a bit for this game, even if they're skeptical. Again, I'm one of the people who have kind of fallen off on Call of Duty, especially in the past few years. I used to play a lot more shooters when I was younger, especially the Call of Duty franchise. But moving into the past few years, there's been some shakeups. I wasn't as big of a fan of the last two titles. I actually have not purchased Call of Duty Vanguard, the current title, which is the first Call of Duty I think I haven't purchased in a long, long time. Black Ops Cold War was one where even I was on the fence there, I have to say, to be honest. But I think the launch of the PS5 and some of the features there did push me over. But again, that game was not one I played for much time there, to be honest. There's some Modern Warfare 2019. I think they realized with Warzone being the beast it is, obviously, it's still built within the Modern Warfare 2019 app. It just really is something that just kind of doesn't go away since it's been launched here. And I think Warzone's going to continue to be the monster it is. Here we're seeing some gameplay from the original Modern Warfare Remake 2019. We're talking about Ground War. This was a preview here that GameSpot did where they got to see the new version of Ground War in Modern Warfare 2. Again, we might have covered a lot of this before, but seeing that we're going to have a large 2023 docket for content here, and there's no plans for a sovereign, standalone Call of Duty title from either Treyarch or Sledgehammer or either or what have you. This is going to be a big year for Infinity Ward to double down on, and we're probably going to see things in terms of support for this game that we really never had before. Obviously, the Battle Pass structure, the Warzone structure, the seasons, everything like that has been relatively new over these past 3 years, but it's been something we've gotten accustomed to pretty quickly. But now we have an opportunity here where there's not another, mainstream game that has to be launched in the year prior that kind of cancels out a lot of this progress. And we're going to see a larger, more long-term live service approach to Call of Duty that, again, we've seen here in Modern Warfare and Warzone, but is really going to kick it to another gear here, I think, where you're not having that requirement of the other game as well, and that in mind. So that's about it for that story from Activision here, but there was a little bit more on that this week as we go back to Sony, because we did have a release here. This comes through a legal report, I believe, in Brazil, where Activision and Blizzard had to comment on the acquisition with Microsoft, and Sony's official response to this had to be recorded. The government of Brazil had questioned other companies, including Sony, about this ownership and what this means for the industry. So I'll get my head out of the way here for a second so you could see. Sony worries players could jump to Xbox if Microsoft owns Call of Duty. So a pretty on the nose headline there. Something that we've been talking about for a long time now since this acquisition has launched. And this is something that is a pretty interesting topic, but to hear this, from Sony themselves makes it a bigger story here. So basically what we're seeing here is that Sony had made a comment that because the brand is so large, because it's so, basically what they're calling it here is monopolistic, that there is no competitor to Call of Duty. And you could say Battlefield, you could say Halo. Obviously, as we talked about in the show here, Battlefield and Halo are not in their finest days these days, unfortunately. Again, you have Apex Legends, you have Rainbow Six Siege, you have Overwatch coming out this fall, again, the sequel to that game. There are a lot of live service shooters that are making up the space here, but really nothing has stood the test of time and has really just stood this strong in the market like Call of Duty has. So genuinely, I do think it's an appropriate concern. I do think Sony has to answer that. You've seen, again, there's not much knowledge here, but this is kind of a speculation here, but we have seen, again, these are, we know about the studios themselves, not about the projects here, but we have seen Sony investing in studios. We've seen them investing in live service. We've seen Deviation Games and some other studios they've talked about that we really don't hear much about after that. That was almost a year ago, that announcement, where they've been working on multiplayer shooter titles for a while now, specifically that one. So who knows? Could Sony come back again with their own blockbuster shooter that could really rival Call of Duty? I'm not sure. That'd be a new day in the gaming industry for sure. That'd be an unexpected development here, but that is not something that are in the cards yet. We have to find out. Again, Sony also bought Bungie. Of course, they have Destiny being the monolith it is. That is a game that also follows that live service approach, has brand new content every year, and makes a lot of money off that content. That being said, we have heard Bungie themselves are interested and jumping into other types of games, other types of opportunities here, and we might see a new IP from Bungie in the future as well. So on that comment of Call of Duty not having a competitor, it seems Sony here has that concern, has that hopefully, ammo there to start investing into something that can run and compete with Call of Duty here. That's gonna be remain to be seen. But that being said, what they did say here about Call of Duty's current status is just obviously true. There is nothing really in the space here that competes with it at this level. We could talk about Grand Theft Auto, of course, with its revenue as well and its staying power over this last decade on one title alone. That's something we love to talk about here. But I think in the shooter space, especially in the cultural, again, Grand Theft Auto comes to mind here when I think of this, but in like the cultural zeitgeist of what games really stand out in terms of the popular culture, people who aren't playing games, Call of Duty is one of those mainstay names that everybody just knows. Same with Madden football and things like FIFA for a long time, but then not until last year, of course. That was a big shakeup. So a lot of these mainstay franchises that you're just used to seeing every year. I mean, 2K basketball, of course. Another there, NBA 2K series. These are things we always expect, and Call of Duty has kind of always fallen into that yearly, just like sports releases, yearly release cycle. Something Assassin's Creed 2 was always a franchise I believe kind of had that status as well to an extent, but then changed to this live service approach later on. So you are seeing the era of annual franchises kind of die out with the last big monolith here, which was Call of Duty. These games are getting very much more expensive to make. The market is very much changing the way games are played, the way people stick with games for longer now, the way content is pumped into games, the way live service strategies have been panning out. Obviously, the business here is changing quite a bit, but it remains to be seen here how this goes down. I mean, we're going to get a lot of interesting new game releases in 2023. Obviously, with all those delays, there is a lot coming next year and a lot coming this fall. So, speaking of Grand Theft Auto, obviously, we don't know when that's coming. Probably 2024, but we're gonna have a fall here with games like Call of Duty coming back, with Modern Warfare 2, Saints Row, the series making a return as well. A few other titles here, but again, not too packed of a fall. Again, Redfall, we're not exactly sure when that is dropping, but I believe that may drop before the end of the year as well. We have a few other things from Obsidian Games, a lot to look forward to here. A lot of Nintendo Switch as well, but it's still definitely something to look forward to here. We have quite a packed fall. But I do want to move on here. We're getting through today to a little bit more on EA, actually. So we're moving on to, we had an EA earnings call this week. So we're kind of hitting a lot of the major companies and publishers here with our stories this week. A little something from everybody, a little tidbit from each company here this week. So EA had their earnings call earlier this week. Again, fielded a lot of questions, not a ton of information out of this earnings call, but there are a few things here, especially what's highlighted in this specific article from IGN here, that I do want to mention. So they were asked, again, like as we talked about there with Microsoft and Activision, are you in the playing field here for this this acquisition game that we've been seeing here in the gaming industry for quite some time now? That EA has responded that they feel good on their own. They think they're in a stronger position, actually, as a standalone company. So I think that is a quotable statement there for sure. Though I will note they did kind of have that marketing speak that we've heard from Ubisoft. We've heard from other studios like that were acquired in the past, like Bethesda. Not just studios that aren't acquired yet, but we've heard this from Activision, from Bethesda, where they've kind of said as well, well, we'll keep the opportunity open, and we're never saying never there. If the opportunity is right, then who knows? So that's, again, not too much to be confirmed there. You can't really say that EA will stay, sovereign forever. That's a confirmation. If anything, that is kind of the article here. I would beg to differ that it's kind of the opposite. From the quote there, obviously them saying they're in a stronger position on their own is a strong statement. I would have to agree with that, absolutely. But then again, leaving that, rumor, mill churning and saying, well, you never know. And it's something that if it works for us, we'll have to look into. It's something to, keep in mind here. Obviously, the industry is changing very much. You have, obviously, as you see the key art here in these articles, you have Xbox and Activision being acquired. You have Bethesda, Zynga, these huge acquisitions here. So it begs the question, what's next? How long can these companies stay afloat on their own? Companies like EA, companies like Ubisoft, companies that are still out, doing their thing, like this. Will they get bought by Sony or Microsoft or another player that we're waiting to see? Will Meta or Google or Apple or one of these other large tech companies jump into gaming like they kind of haven't been? We've seen Netflix do things with mobile gaming, jump into subscription services and have a mobile game platform subscription similar to Game Pass and the like. I mean, if you will. So obviously the tech industry, the media industry is definitely very much focused on these shifts here. These are very, very large moves and shifts in the market. And we're just going to have to wait and see. I can't really say this article is a confirmation that, yeah, EA will stay on their own, because really, who knows? We do have a direct quote here, which is a pretty self-explanatory quote from the CEO here, which is, our objective is to always take care of our people, players, and our shareholders. Obviously, that did get a little ire from some fans online, as EA has been notoriously at the center of a lot of player and fan scandals where players were not exactly happy or felt they were being taken care of. So it is a little, unfortunately, to get a little irony there. I do see some backlash there on that comment, but I do think that this move here is for the better. I think that we are moving in the right direction with a lot of these companies here. And the final quote there was, should there be a way for us to do that differently than the way we're doing that today? I, of course, would have to be open to that, but I will tell you today that we feel very confident and excited for our future. So that's interesting there. Again, as he says there, if there comes a day where we do things differently, we'll let you know. But for right now, we're excited for the future. So that kind of implies there that we're going to keep doing the things the way we intend to do them going forward. But if that plan changes, we'll let you know. So I'm hoping that plan is to continue the things they've been doing in the past year, unfortunately, because I do think that is going to drive some things in the wrong direction here. I do think there are monetization practices that can be handled. Again, I don't think there is a perfect monetization practice for a company that can be done for max profit without, I don't want to say pay to win here for games, but without kind of exploiting some of the assets and the resources that should probably be in a full game. I don't think there's not a perfect world where we can have, a good practice where the company is making what they need to make while also having players jumping in, experiencing what they can experience, not really missing out on major features. Maybe, again, we've had this conversation a lot of times on the show. Do you just go with cosmetics and things that don't affect the gameplay of the game? Do you go with practices that stop, progress in the game, like pay to win practices that force you to pay real money to make progress that would take, grinding hours and hours and hours to an unrealistic amount? The only other option you see sometimes developers will have kind of predatory pricing practices like this. They'll have something that really should be easy to acquire. Again, I'll have to use EA for an example here to keep it on topic. Back in Star Wars Battlefront, when Battlefront 2 had launched, to play as Darth Vader, again, this is a Star Wars game where you're supposed to be able to play as many Star Wars characters as you can. There were about, I want to say, a handful, less than 10 heroes in the game at launch, so less than 10 of our favorite characters. Of course, they have Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Princess Leia, the characters, Han Solo, the ones you would expect. But that being said, a lot of these characters were locked behind paywalls unless you grinded in the game for many, many hours. So people did the math actually back then. This was a big deal online that players of the game were saying that to actually unlock Darth Vader, again, probably the most iconic character, not only in Star Wars, but maybe arguably in media, one of the most iconic characters of all time, to play as him in all of the modes where you can play as a hero character like that, you had to grind. They did the math here, at least 40 hours of gameplay and opening these loot boxes. And that was sometimes if you got lucky with certain loot drops and things of the like. Or you could just pay, again, like $8 to $10, $20, whatever it was, for those Star Wars points, and then just purchase him that way, those credits, whatever system they had in that game. So there comes a time where practices like that, where you do put in some pricing practices that I believe are over the line. And it comes to a point where, again, we look at back in the day. I was talking about Modern Warfare 2 before as an example, so I'll use that as an example again. Say 10 years ago when Modern Warfare 2 came out, it would come out with all the base maps, all the base weapons, pretty much a finished product. Of course, there were bugs, patches, there were updates, there was Xbox Live and PlayStation Network Online. There were, of course, these incremental updates to some extent. But when it came to DLC, really, this wasn't really how it worked back in the day. There were games like Call of Duty where you'd pay $20 for a map pack and you get 3 new maps. And now we have games, again, we'll get into it soon, well, here with EA, games like Battlefield, where they come out, obviously we talked about Battlefield 2042 many times in the show, where the game comes out unfinished. It doesn't have, nearly as amount, the amount of content required. The maps aren't there, the weapons aren't there, and you see multiple years of them trying to supplement that. And I think, obviously with live service, things like Fortnite, things like Warzone, where you supplement with new content like that for free, but then you also include those cosmetics, you include those other things that people really want to bite on and really want to, purchase, things like a skin, where you can be, your favorite character now in Warzone. Of course, people are going to, want the option for that. And if it doesn't hurt anybody else in the game, people can generally say that is a good practice. That being said, this is maybe just me particularly. I'm of the notion when I'm playing a game, say Call of Duty or Battlefield, and there are things like, those cosmetics where they'll add lasers to the bullets, or they'll add, crazy effects where you'll turn into a cartoon or something like that. It can take away from the immersion of games. We talk a lot about immersion on this show, our passion for VR, our passion for getting into games, how HUD and UI play into that. And when you have cosmetics that like I think Warzone is probably the best example, where you have 3 years worth of content, multiple games pushing weapons and content into that with their own special releases, it becomes kind of a cluster, for lack of a better word, of just a lot of stuff together that doesn't really fit. You have, like for example, I said before, you have things where you have Rambo, fighting Rick from Rick and Morty. There are things that just don't. Again, that's fun. That's fine. I love that stuff in Fortnite, for example, of course, where they have pretty much everything for pop culture you can think of, in one arena. It's a cartoon art style. I'm definitely into that stuff. I like the idea of the metaverse and things, combining. I do think it's fun. So I don't want to be, a Debbie Downer here. I do like, having those Godzilla and things like that in Call of Duty is obviously, a cool thing for fans of these franchises. I don't want to say that it's not. But when you have all this in once and you're trying to play a military simulator game and your only options are to play, the most popular game in the world like Call of Duty, or something that has a smaller community, games like, Enlisted is one I've been playing a lot of. World War II game I really do enjoy. But, to get that experience, you do have to look elsewhere now, because a lot of these monetary practices do kind of take away not just from the gameplay itself and the themes of the game. I mean, you see that as well with Battlefield 2042, where we had the game launch with specialists that were a new addition to the franchise, with goofy kind of like one-liners like other live service games and things of the like that had a little more tongue-in-cheek tone. So it was a little tough, in contrast. I'm going to pull up a new Battlefield article here as well, because we have that in the news today. But to the contrast there, again, of having this very grounded, gritty marketing campaign that Battlefield had last year, which was, this is in the near future. It's a resource war. These are no-pats, fighting outside of nations. The world is collapsing. It's a very dire situation. They had a lot of very cinematic film-like trailers almost with characters from Battlefield 3 and 4 that were very surreal. We even had a character, I believe, from Battlefield 4 that passes away in one of the trailers for the new game to set up how serious and dark the tone of this new game was. And then this game drops. There's no story mode. There's multiplayer with these large, open, seemingly battle royale intended type maps. And you have these characters, again, amongst a lot of technical issues, you have these characters making cheeky one-liners at the end of each round and doing goofy smiling faces. And you have Santa Claus skins coming out that Christmas holiday after the launch when all this was going on. So it was not the best look for a game that came out with this, this return to what Battlefield was, especially Battlefield 4 and 3, of this, this, I wouldn't want to say too realistic simulator type like some other military sim games, but very, cinematic, military based, no nonsense, really, crazy action like moments. Only in Battlefield used to be the slogan there, only in Battlefield moments, crazy explosions, real soldiers, tanks, helicopters. It didn't have that, for lack of a better word here, like, that pop culture element where, that kind of stuff was being forced in. And not that there is that, pop culture might not be the right word, but that kind of, that lack of identity, I want to say. Not that it was too goofy for any game to have, these quips from the characters, but it was inconsistent, and that was the problem. They had too many things going on at once there. It's hard to combine that really serious, even sinister sometimes tone of the marketing and of the gameplay, like art style, with what kind of came out, which was not only a little goofy in some circumstances, but obviously very broken and lacking in a lot of ways. I mean, this game has had less weapons than any other Battlefield game at launch, and many other Battlefield games after launch have posted hundreds of weapons and multiple new maps in the battle passes and that have came after the launch. So unfortunately, here comes our story. And today, I've obviously been seeing this on the screen for some time now, but a new Battlefield 2042 update finally begins to address some of these big concerns with the maps. Unfortunately, this is not something that was too much of a large improvement here. So I'm going to jump in a little more on the article here so we can see this layout. What has happened here has Battlefield has acknowledged the problems with these maps here. As I said before, Battle Royale-esque. A lot of people have stated that this game at one point was intended for maybe a Battle Royale mode, was intended for other purposes, and had to switch course. Again, that's still kind of a rumor in development, so I don't want to put too much credence into that. But that being said, the design of these maps were very bare bones. There was a lot of space in between. And even when you had these 128 player counts in this game, much of that was AI from the time, because there were no players, unfortunately, on these servers at launch at some points. And unfortunately, it was just not conducive to any real great action gameplay. There was no cover. There was a lot of running for 10 minutes. And this has been a criticism of Battlefield in the past. From players like, when you're used to playing a game like Call of Duty, you're in a very tight map. You're probably shooting at someone or being shot at back at every couple of seconds. It's very close quarters, Twitch shooter, you would probably call that. You have to, be very quick on the sticks there. Not that Battlefield isn't, not that you don't have to be quick when you're, in conflicts, but especially in Battlefield games, you're getting in a vehicle, you're going cross map. It can take a minute or two. But with this game, for this to have these, complaints from the Battlefield community themselves to not, those that are used to that kind of gameplay and in for the long haul there are still calling things like a walking sim, as you have in the, the article title here, that's when it becomes a problem. These maps were very, very open. It was not very conducive to great layout for a lot of battles. So you do see here that they have gone ahead and updated just one map, so that one of their launch maps they have added, and I wouldn't play this weekend. And don't get me wrong here. I mean, this is something that I know development takes a lot of time, especially when there are issues as prevalent as there was in this game. And I really do give the developers here credit for how much progress and how much they've been churning on, trying to make all these improvements. When I did play after this update to check in on what was going on with this game. I was surprised to see I did have to go on cross-platform servers. I will note that I could not find a game on PS5, as I have said in the past. That being said, when you do turn cross-platform on, you get a bit of more support from the community here. You see, as Season 1 has started a few weeks back, and now that this patch has gone in, you see more people playing on this new map here, trying it out. There are 2 new weapons, I believe, one including a crossbow as well. So, not, it's still something exciting there, but when you have past Battlefield games adding a lot of weapons at their launch with these updates, and especially with this one, again, this is a game that only has 3 assault rifles or 4 assault rifles, I believe. If you're a big shooter fan, you may know, or you're a Call of Duty fan, especially if you're going to compare here, you may know it's a very low number, especially if you're a Battlefield fan. It's a very low number. Most games have a lot of different weapons, different gadgets, different vehicles, different maps. This game, we're still on pretty much, I don't want to say bare bones here, but pretty much on launch status, to where this game maybe should have been at launch, maybe even not yet at launch, but the way the rest of the maps are still having these same issues. This map, again, they have added things like crates, different lanes here, a little bit changes to the layouts, but then again, not much has been changed here. And again, not to say that there hasn't been a lot of hard work and effort put into this. I do not want to make that kind of connotation whatsoever. But after a year of waiting, as a fan, as someone who's, speaking as a consumer here, a fan of the series, as a player, this is, for me, a little too little, too late. This is a game that when I go back to when I did play this again, the graphics are fantastic. The animation work is really nice. The lighting is great. The texture work, everything there with the presentation, I can't complain. A lot of the glitches that we've had about, not being able to do certain features, things not being very snappy, things not being able to revive other players, a lot of the, hit detection issues there where you're shooting and your bullets aren't landing when they should be, things like that. A lot of that has been fixed, and it's been much smoother. And I genuinely did have some fun playing for a little bit there, but I do want to be clear that it just gave me the urge to play maybe another Battlefield game. I ended up playing Battlefield 5, who's a game that had its, fair share of issues as well for its initial year of launch, but it came back strongly. And then, fortunately, really unfortunately for the Battlefield franchise, it got a lot of resurgence when Battlefield 2042 had the unfortunate launch that it had, and the Battlefield community was still eager to get back into the series. So Battlefield 5 has been pretty fun, getting to play that World War II game again. All of that game's issues have been very much fixed by now, and it does have much more of a variety. Even that game that had its issues at launch has come back in spades with new weapons, new maps, new features, none of those previous bugs. And again, maybe it is me being a little impatient here, but I'm not really excited about it at the moment. I'll say, maybe in a few years when we see what's next from Battlefield, but I'm not really too excited to wait another 2 years here to see the rest of the launch maps get a few more, changes here, like we see here on the screen. I don't think that's, unfortunately, the most exciting thing to be excited for in the future when it comes to gaming. But that being said, I'm hoping that Battlefield can make a resurgence. I'm hoping this game can come back in. I'm kind of really curious why they haven't embraced their Portal mode more. Again, if you don't remember, Battlefield Portal, which was announced at this game's launch, includes assets from Battlefield 3, Battlefield Bad Company, and Battlefield 1942. They have 2 maps from Battlefield 3 and Battlefield Bad Company as well, and I'm not sure why, especially when fans were really just clamoring for that, that modern warfare kind of Battlefield experience to come back. Why they wouldn't maybe try to incorporate some of that, Portal content into the main, all out war servers, or even again add those assets back, from those older games, update them a little bit more, like you have the other textures, but you could probably use a lot of pre-existing assets from pre-existing maps and just port us maps. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of when franchises like Call of Duty, and the Call of Duty is definitely a big victim of this. Just, supplement their game with a lot of the classic maps. Yeah, I'm happy to play those classic maps. I do want some new ones as well. But a lot of times, especially on Modern Warfare, and again, this is arguable here, this is just my opinion, but I do think that there are a lot of times where some of the newer maps aren't, as fun as the older layouts, and they tend to gravitate towards those older maps from previous games. So again, that's not the ideal practice here, but it's better than nothing. I mean, we're coming in with, again, if you're playing Battlefield Portal mode, that's one thing. There are only a couple combinations you could do there with like 2 to 4 maps from those games and a handful of weapons from each of those titles. There's only so much you could do with modifiers and different gameplay modes. And I do think that if Battlefield maybe embraced that, maybe brought back older games, rebuilt kind of Battlefield 3, 4 style gameplay in this title, that could be an opportunity here. I'm surprised they haven't really done much of that, but it does seem on some level like they're supporting this game, getting it stable to a certain extent as much as it can be with the current layout, and then moving on. I think they may be just dropping what they had here, kind of fixing, cutting their losses, and kind of moving out to the next game. That's just my opinion, but we'll have to wait and see moving on there from Battlefield. But I think we're getting closer to the end of our show here actually today. We're probably going to be a little under an hour today on this episode. Again, not the craziest week of gaming news. Again, a little bit of a bummer there with the Battlefield update. But again, if you're really clamoring or dying to play Battlefield 2042 and it was a stability issue or, again, a server issue, I would recommend trying it again. I think it was something that I did have some fun with. There definitely are servers if you're playing cross-platform, at least where I am on the East Coast in the U.S. I would imagine it's similar on the West Coast as well in the U.S. Other regions I can't speak on, Europe, Asia, what have you, but I don't know. Obviously, I don't play on those servers, but I would suspect that it's a pretty active community to some extent. I do think you can get a game, but again, definitely put on cross-platform because on PlayStation I cannot find a server with more than 1 or 2 people in it. So definitely look for those cross-platforms and give it a try. But we're gonna have to see. Not the best few years here for some of our favorite shooters. We're hoping. Again, I'm very excited for Call of Duty as well this fall, and a little resurgence of some of the shooters I enjoyed a few years back. But moving on to something else. Another FPS story here that was quite interesting and very unexpected. This is a brand new game announcement here that I'm about to pull up that we got from the developers of Dead by Daylight. So I'm going to bring this up. If you're a fan of Dead by Daylight, you may be very curious about this new title from them. It's very different. So again, I'm not a huge Dead by Daylight player. I believe I did play it once or twice, actually. It was a free game 1 month, I believe, on PlayStation or on Xbox, and I did give it a chance. And I did have some fun with it. I'm not the biggest horror movie guy. That's kind of why I didn't stay. But I did see how great of a game this was. If you're not familiar with Dead by Daylight, it takes a lot of classic horror characters, and it kind of gives this asymmetrical competition where you have one player who is the slasher, so it's like Jason, Michael Myers, who is the horror character, and then you have the rest of the players being regular people who have to defend themselves, hide, maybe escape the level. That's at least my understanding to the extent of Dead by Daylight. Maybe someone would be able to explain that better who's more of a fan of the series. But that being said, very much a horror focus there. Definitely a focus on that PvP aspect in a very unique way. A kind of player versus player structure that you don't see often in other, direct, like a first-person shooter type where you're just kind of going head-to-head in different game modes. But here we have a new announcement. Of course, you can see on screen here if you're watching on video that Dead by Daylight Studios' next game is going to be an interesting, very interesting title. So this game is called Meet Your Maker. You can see here in the title that this game has you create evil levels for other players to infiltrate. So how this works here, and I'm going to actually play this trailer here in the background as I discuss this. We may have to wait a second as that we get an advertisement there, yeah. But we'll wait for that to start up. But yeah, this game basically has you create your own forts, things you need to defend, and booby trap them. So you kind of make your own kind of like booby trapped lair, if you will. I'm trying to think kind of like Indiana Jones, a lot of traps, a lot of things, for other players to find. But then you leave that open, you leave it to defense. It kind of reminds me of games like Rust, if you will, where you have your own structure you have to defend, things like that. But you basically set up these puzzle like booby trap laden pathways, if you will, that are meant to stump other players, are meant to challenge them and defend that, your base from them. So I'm going to play this trailer here. I'm going to pull this up on the side and we'll see a little bit of that gameplay. So I don't think we do have audio running here today, unfortunately, but I do want to just note some of the visuals here. Again, you see that this is going to be again, I haven't played too much Dead by Daylight to know much about the art style. You can see there's definitely, I wouldn't say horror, but there's some gritty art style here. There's some gore. There's, you see that kind of that alien looking brute guy there. There's definitely that grittiness to the style here. You see a little bit of this flying comet. So you can see this kind of base building system. It looks very cool. It reminds me a lot of, obviously Minecraft. You think of like the Fallout, the settlement systems, or we're seeing from Starfield as well coming up. We've talked about on the show recently. You see these base building systems in a lot of games, but those are a few that I thought that were kind of not really base building games. But then you see this first person shooter gameplay. You see this slasher. It almost looks like Doom or Quake or one of those, high action first person shooters. And you're infiltrating, player created environments, which I think is really cool. So not only will you have to create your own environments, which are really complex, like as you're seeing on screen here, very cool stuff. You can also, again, I think the idea of having to defend yours, getting to infiltrate and kind of attack other settlements, it seems like it'd be a really cool idea if handled properly. Again, I'm not too familiar with a lot of this, the work here from the studio, but I'm very intrigued by this trailer here. I think it's very interesting. Again, very interesting art style. You see things like the grappling hook there, some melee gameplay. Looks to be some visceral, first-person gameplay here. And I'm curious to see how in-depth not only the player-created levels can get, but how in-depth the story is here. How much of this is player-created, how much of this is obviously, they're all in-game assets, but how much of this ties into something greater than that? Is there a narrative? Is there something else that are there, AI built environments that you can play if you don't have online access? There are a few questions I do have here for this game, but you do see it is coming out on most major platforms, albeit I don't think Switch is there, which is to be expected. But I'm seeing, Xbox, PlayStation Series, the PlayStation 5 and 4, and Steam as well. So you got the whole, I think pretty much the whole gamut there with that game's release. So something to be excited about. Yeah, we don't know too much else about this game, but we do know, again, so just a note there, the studio name that is Behavior Beyond, who created Dead by Daylight and are now bringing out this game, Meet Your Maker. So that's the cool thing. Kind of on the nose title there. Again, you're creating these levels, and again, that maybe hints at some story there. Maybe the narrative of how the player is in this world and the like. But that about brings the end of that article there. So that is it for that new game, and that brings us to the end of our show, actually. So it's, again, a bit of a shorter show today. I want to thank everyone who tuned in, and I realized I have not been seeing the comments this whole time, so I want to thank all of you for commenting. I appreciate that. And I'm going to read what'd you say here. Thank you there. It needs to be available in the in-game UI. Thank you, Jake. There, yeah. So that was the PlayStation Accolades earlier in the show. So I'm sorry I did not see all your chats. Thank you all for tuning in today. I really appreciate everyone who tuned into the show. And again, we had a bit of a short show today. That's going to be about it from me. But I did want to discuss before we go a bit about some of the media news we had this week. We did see some shakeups in the media industry, most notably HBO and Warner Brothers. We saw both the cancellation of the Batgirl movie and the announcement that the whole DC kind of universe and everything they've been doing at Warner Brothers is getting a complete shakeup, and they're going to try now to compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe a little more head on, and kind of seems that they're kind of getting onto the Disney strategy here. We need to have DC be what Marvel is in a similar way. So a lot of shakeups there in the movie space for Warner Brothers, but not only that, they also announced that HBO Max will maybe not only be combined with Discovery Plus, but maybe even be canceled. So that's kind of interesting there. You would think that Discovery would maybe be the smaller brand there under HBO Max. Again, viewership-wise, I know HBO Max is a very popular service, definitely making a lot of revenue. But that being said, the CEO is that of the Discovery side. So maybe he had a little more bias, towards Discovery. That's something I wasn't aware of at the time, but I do think it's a bit of an interesting move there. Obviously, Discovery is more so, plus the streaming service is more so known for not only some of their more, I believe, nature and lifestyle-based shows, but a lot of other, reality television, TLC, a lot of that reality content there. And that has a large viewer base that really shouldn't be ignored. Obviously, HBO with Game of Thrones, Warner Brothers properties like Harry Potter, you have the TV properties like Comedy Central shows, Cartoon Network, all of that under Warner. Obviously, that had, things like Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, matter. I mean, these are, monolithic franchises there. So no question there. But, reality content, when it comes to the money, the viewers are there on the reality content just the same way. And, they're going to follow what makes sense there. So while I do get that, and I do understand that perspective there, I don't think HBO as a brand hopefully needs to be messed with too much to do so. And I don't think that's the case. I think they know the in-house studios. But I did want to note on that because this does shake up things maybe for some of the TV and movie appearances we heard in the past from both Sony and some other video game projects. Again, we did talk a lot about HBO's The Last of Us. Again, a very video game involved show. Usually try to keep it mostly gaming here, but I did think that was kind of notable this week. And obviously pop culture and gaming can very much intertwine. But that is about it today. I didn't have an article for that, just kind of on my mind there, but I thought I would note that in the show. But in terms of media news this week, I'm about tapped out. Again, not the biggest week here, kind of later in the summer. I think we're getting prepped for a lot of fall releases as well as announcements. We're getting that Sony conference. It's coming up soon. It was September last year. We missed it this summer during Games Fest, and we've been speculating that. So obviously, as a PlayStation fan, I'm pretty excited for that, either later this month or early September. I think we're going to see that. So stay tuned on the Endless Reports because I'm sure we're going to be covering all those new game announcements. And the Steam Deck, that's coming this fall as well. So again, it's been out in the hands. I'm more thinking on terms of what I'm getting this fall because I'm getting my Steam Deck this fall. But as I said in the beginning of the episode, that's ramping up, and a lot of people are going to get that later this year, early next year. So a lot to be excited for. Again, we're going to see a lot coming up, but that's about it on the docket here. So I'm going to end this long closing outro here and say thank you once again to all you guys that joined in the chat here. I really appreciate all of that. And we'll see you on the next Endless Report. Just to note, we do have a lot of streams in between during now and the next Endless Report. It's going to be a big week for Endless UAE. So stay tuned for some more team streams. And then stay tuned for the week after that because we'll be wrapping up our Endless Summer. We're actually all the way here close to, we're in August now. We're getting close to the end of August. So we're going to see a lot more with the teams there. We may even get see some teams get to play test some games, see all their progress they have made, maybe even see the other teams' games, and we'll have some cool panels there. It's going to be an exciting week. So a lot to look forward here on the docket at Endless Studios. Again, super happy to do this show every Friday and to talk the news with everybody here online. So once again, thank you. This has been the Endless Report, the 20th episode. Really excited to continue doing this show. It's been a real joy for me to be able to do this. For my job, to be able to have a show like this is really cool. So thank you so much, guys, for all your support. Thanks for talking to me about games every week here. And hopefully, we'll have some people back on the show next week, some more people to talk with me here. We'll see if Ben's back next week and we can discuss more of the latest and greatest news. So that about does it for me here. We're going to close out today around the end of the hour here. So thank you all for watching and stay tuned to Endless Studios for more. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.